Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, no, 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 no. Melanated minds with the crown restored. Asiatic truth that we cannot ignore. Honor to noble DrewAli, we rise. Nationality reclaimed, open your eyes. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, the spark. No more strangers walking in the dark. Research first, let the facts ignite. Real Morse talk every week, truth over hype. This is knowledge, this is heritage, this is consciousness. Welcome to Real Morse Talk with your hostess, Prime Minister Durriyyah Bey. Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, no, 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 no. Shadow hour. 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 You are now tuned into Real Morse Talk. Melanated glow, crown back on the throne. Asiatic spirit, yes, we finally home. Honor noble DrewAli, we proclaim. Nationality restored, we reclaim the name. Yeah, yeah. Love, truth, peace, let it spark that fire. Freedom, justice, lifting hearts higher. No more strangers, we know our part. Real Morse Talk, truth from the heart. Real Morse Talk, truth from the heart. Real Morse Talk, that's right. Yeah, na, 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 na. Shadow hour. Yeah, na, 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 na. Shadow hour. Yeah, na, 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 na. Shadow hour. Yeah, na, 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 na. That's it. That's it. This is heritage. That's it. Rise up. This is consciousness. That's it. Rise up. That's your heritage. That's it. Rise up. Never haven't been. That's it. Rise up. This is heritage. This is consciousness with your hostess, Prime Minister Durriyyah Bey.
All right, Morse. All right. We are live on Real Morse Talk. We had a few technical difficulties. Some of you all who probably tried to stream in on the YouTube platform, it wasn't taken. So Shamsuddin, who is our producer, we love him so much. He had to do some quick changes to fix it so we can be live on YouTube for those who watch YouTube, as we also are on another streaming platform now called Twitch. So first and always, I want to always rise the ethers and give the praises to the Creator, whom I choose to call Allah, for allowing me to wake up this rising in my right frame of mind with my good common sense, life, health, and consciousness, with the ability to stay on this road, the knowledgeable road, the Islamic road, the conscious road. Sometimes it's rough and sometimes it's smooth. And I'm telling you, sometimes that rocky rough, woo, it gets you. But when you know your purpose, it makes it all worthwhile. So I just want to rise and give those extra praises to Allah today, and honor to His most holy and divine prophets. All of the prophets that came to do the work of Allah, Isa, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, Prophet Noble DrewAli in the founder's form, Prophet Noble DrewAli in the reincarnated form. For all of those who are out there striving to uplift fallen humanity, I give honor to each and every one of you today on this Thursday. And we have a really good show for you today. Per your request. All right, the National Grand Sheikh Tarik Bey is here per your request. And also, we did send out the flyers asking you all to please donate to the Grand Sheikh. Now, a lot of you all will want to listen to everything that has been said, but do not want to donate. And I just don't understand our mindset about donation to help each other. We'll spend all that fiat on them Europeans buying sneakers and jeans with the latest this, the latest that, food, clothing, whatever. But when it comes to just sending a couple of dollars to us, we seem to have a hard time doing that. And I don't use the crab and the pot syndrome, because the crabs that are in the hot pot, they're climbing their way up, trying to get out of a situation. They're not deliberately bringing someone back down. They're trying to get out just like the other crabs. And so sometimes when you're trying to get out, some people are going to fall back. That's that. So people that whole European psychology about you crab pulling each other down, that's not the right scenario of it. Think about what the crab is trying to do in that hot water. It's not in this natural environment. So it's climbing its way back to the top to get out of an environment that it feels endangered in. Okay, so that's the real scenario on that whole crab syndrome. So I'm not going to use that. But I'm going to say to you all is while we're live on this broadcast, donate. The National Grand Sheikh Tarik Bey works for himself. At 80 years old, he still works for himself. And so he's taking the time to come here to do this. And some of you might say, well, we didn't ask for it or whatever, but you all like to listen. You all like to learn. So donate, donate, donate. I also would like to say that our online schooling for Moorish children is now open for enrollment. And we are, creating our new website. And the next time we come on Real Moorish Talk, we will have the new website up and running for you all with the links. So enrollment's open now. So you can call us at 443-910-7739. We also ask you, even if you don't have a child, you can donate to our online schooling for Moorish children MC. All right. If you want more questions about anything, you can always email us at realmooristalk@yahoo.com. And please donate to our humanitarian organization, which is the DaughtersofDrewAli. That's the Cash App. And listen, you can donate to the Grand Sheikh right there, to the Daughters of DrewAli. You can donate right there to that. And we did see it out in the email. We sent out other links to donate to. If you're a Zelle person, you can do the 703-628-1711. And, you can also go to Moorish Science with GSK at DurriyyahBey.com. And you can email there too. So we did send you all the places that you could donate. All right, because it's really important that we support one another, and I'm excited to have the Grand Sheikh here as always today to make sure that you get the information, because this was per audience request. You all were requesting that the Grand Sheikh come speak on the Yakub Experiment, because I could have spoke on it too, but I know you all enjoy hearing the Grand Sheikh and liking him to speak. And so therefore, I'm allowing him to take the lead today on this. Of course, I'm going to be here supporting him today, but we're going to use our Grand Sheikh today. He's going to be basically as my co-host today, and he's going to be talking to you all about the whole Moabite, because this is the difference is Moorish history and Moabite history. And we know that Moabite is more ancient than Moorish history, but the Moabite profanes, when we talk about Moabite, we're talking about the Moabite is the feminine energy. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. In the Moabite nation, we're talking about the Moabites are all Moors. We know that that's ancient. The prophet said, are the ancient Moabites who inhabit the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. So you'll be coming from that point of view. And today's title, the Yakub Experiment, fact or fiction? And so the Grand Sheikh is going to speak to you today, dismissing the fiction portion to give you the factual information that he has to share with us today. Okay, and so I'm just so excited to have Grand Sheikh with us today. Again, I'm going to say while we're live streaming, Moors, donate to one of those places. Donate while you're live streaming. And even if you can't afford the $25 donation, any donation is appreciated. I did explain to y'all before that we had like 15,000 viewers on one video. If every viewer would have sent just $1, and even if it was repeat views, let's just say maybe some repeats, $7,000 to $8,000, just sending $1, $2, $3. So you all have enough fiat to send, to help uplift all humanity. So at this time, I'm going to bring on none other than our National Grand Sheikh, our National Grand Sheikh, who I love and dare so much, and we're just so glad to have him here. And we're going to bring on National Grand Sheikh Tarik Khatib Bey.
Islam, Prime Minister.
Islam Grand Sheikh. And so we will go over a little today because we did get a late start. We had, it's always something, with these platforms, and this is why we need to own our own.
Yeah.
It's because you know, the live streaming, all of a sudden when Sean went to try to get it started, the live streaming wasn't working. And so he had to go on YouTube and see when I did my very first, you know, Real Morse Talk.
Yes.
YouTube didn't stream it. So I lost my very first soft opening because I don't have any record of it anywhere because it lost it. And so I was so nervous today that this is such an important topic that you're speaking about that we were not going to be able to have it. So I'm glad that Shamsuddin took the time to fix it. And we was like, we'll have to please let the music introduction keep playing and playing and playing. And, you know, trust me, they'll understand that we're coming on. And the funny thing is, Shamsuddin was just saying, Prime Minister, you're always on time. You're never late. So I guess the universe wanted to show us that, you know, you could be late. But if you're on late, you got to have a backup plan, right? To be on time. Islam is a grand sheet. So today we're going to be talking about the Yakub Experiment. And you know, you wrote a book about Yakub. I wrote a book about Yakub. And then you have a lot of information that you're going to share with us today that we're looking forward to maybe adding to the book to actually enhance it so that people can purchase it. But we do have the Yakub Experiment. It is on sale at circle7publishing.com. And so I'm just know that everyone is excited to hear from you. But I have to keep pushing that you do this out of the kindness of your heart. But that, you know, donations are necessary. I mean, as a Grand Sheik, you never ask anybody for anything. And the bottom line is that when we're asking you to do so much for us to contribute, to give us knowledge, to continue to educate, to erudite us, that we can at least try to show our things to you. And I know to you it doesn't matter, but it does matter to the rest of us. It matters to me, and it does matter to as a livelihood. The prophet said a servant is what? Worthy of their hire. So we need to follow the instructions of our holy and divine prophet, DrewAli, and service those who are doing the work. Islam, Grand Sheik?
Islam.
All right. So at this time, Grand Sheik, everyone knows who you are. So I don't have to introduce you, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor. I'm going to put you on solo, and I'll be here in the background, and I'll come in and out as needed. But I know you got a lot of information you want to get started today on. So I just want everyone to make sure you have a pen and paper ready. You know, me and Grand Sheik always tell you to have pen and paper ready, you know, for today's topic. And listen, if you don't do pen and paper, what you'll be able to do is rerun this video again so that you'll be able to take notes. Islam, Grand Sheik?
Islam.
Islam. At this time, I'm going to give you the floor, Grand Sheik. You're on the mic. Islam, Grand Sheik.
Islam. First, I rise and give honor to Allah and to his most holy and divine prophet, Noble Drali, and to all the wonderful works he's brought unto us. Today, we're going to discuss the history of the ancient Moabite matriarchate. So when you're talking about human history, to go to the ancient, or what is known as the archaic history, pre-Moorish, keep in mind when you're talking Moorish history, you're talking ancient history. When you're talking Moabite history, you're talking archaic. That's when the general planet in general was a matriarchy distinguished from the patriarchy. So when you're talking Moabite history, you're going back further than the Moorish history, but you're dealing with the same Asiatic nation. The distinction must be made that the Moabite history is the matriarchy. It becomes Moorish history when it becomes a patriarchy. Same ancient Asiatic nation. So in the ancient and archaic world, they would refer to the ancient Moabites. The general code, or what you call anthropological code, that they may relate to when they talk about the ancient Moabite history, they will veil it under the more modern, what they refer to as the ancient Egyptian order, which is actually Hikupta, which is ancient Moabite. Now, we're going to be making some references for your erudition from this literature, The Nigger Problem, and from this, and from some of these notes,
Really, yes, and that book was the Yakub Experiment. Just so we'll know, that was the name of that book.
Some of these notes. Now, this information is generally referred to in the world as adept level information. A lot of this information can be found in the Library of Congress at North America and is usually only received through verified certification. However, all adepts from all organizations on the planet are very well aware of this information, not just the adepts in the Moorish Divine and National Movement. So you must be aware that this is common knowledge among government structure. It's just not necessarily displayed among the general public for control purposes on the part of government, and particularly government that are operating in a de facto venue, i.e., those who have been maintaining what is known as loosely slavery, or what is known in fact as actually human trafficking, to maintain their hegemony operations of authority under color of venue, color of law, color of authority, and color of office, which has been the problems that humanity, for the most part, has been suffering in these days. And so we're sharing some of this information with the general public because it all involves the birthright or the divine right of humans in general. And logically, in order for us to begin or to maintain the movement of helping to uplift fallen humanity, we must know some of the history of the ancient Moabite in order to understand some of the motivations of activities that take place in the geopolitical world that affects everybody. And being a part of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, logically, a lot of the burden in the aid of helping to uplift fallen humanity stands on the shoulders of many Moorish Americans, which is why many people that come to these degrees start participating in the Moorish Divine and National Movement once they get a little bit of the information from the Adeptus degrees that have been shared over the years. And the modern day initiation for helping to uplift fallen humanity has been initiated particularly in the North Gate by Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali, known to the people in general as Noble Drew Ali. And so I'm going to share some of the Adeptus level information with you for your erudition and for your foundation to research. Also, it would give you some ideas on how to go back to the state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers so that we can start countering the misprisions that have been put upon humanity through the SOS. And the SOS is not emergency for help. The SOS is actually the synagogue of Satan. And that has to do with the corruptors who are governing the world at this time, who have been profiting from human genocide via the constant and continuous wars that most of you have been living your whole lives experiencing these continuous wars. And to counter the synagogue of Satan, you have to kind of understand some of their motivations. So we'll share some of the history of the nigger problem with you, because most of the operators of the synagogue of Satan are in corporate organizations, i.e., of those orders that have been causing injury on the planet. And so right here, take a screenshot. And what we're dealing with is, and I'll read some of the notes. Heterogeneous hybrida. Heterogeneous hybrida. Also known, as they've told you loosely in some of the schools, the Paleolithic. That's what they call the Paleolithic man, or the ruddy red breed that's referenced in the book of Genesis also. So this is alluding to the main reference points of this treatise that we're having tonight. And that treatise, we will authoritatively state that there is scientific evidentiary proof that, quote unquote, nigger is not a grammatically truthful nor scientifically applicable when it is imperfectly signified to relate to the consanguinity or pedigree of the original Asiatic, woolly-haired, dark olive complexion natural peoples of the earth. It refers to the anthropoid, i.e. species known as gorilla and chimpanzee. The operations of the heterogeneous hybrida experiments took place in the peninsula in the north, the lower part of the North Gate, i.e. known as Mexico, and the peninsula thereby beneath it in general is where those experiments took place that brings about the heterogeneous species that is known loosely to the world as the Albion ruddy breed, sometimes loosely referred to as the European, i.e. And many of the people not knowing why they are referred to as modern man, that is why, because they're actually a heterogeneous hybrid. Now, in relationship to the Roman order takeover on the planet in modern ancient history, because remember, when you're talking ancient history, it's actually modern to the ancient Moabites. But in reference on how history has been taught to the general masses, we will qualify those references. And so by virtue of the Roman order attacking the Moabite bloodline, now the Moabite bloodline will be referred to you in the Septuaginta, the Bible or the Quran, as the bloodline of Yeshua ben Yosef, and that would be referred to as the bloodline of Jesus. That is the woolly-headed, dark complexion, i.e. peoples, and the bloodline of the ancient Moabites, which in the modern days will be referred to as Al-Moroccan, which means descendants of Moroccans, and in short referred to as Moors or the Moorish. So the modern mixed breed of the ancient Moabites is Moorish. That's where Moorish comes from. So the misprision that we're experiencing on the planet is in essence the maladministration of public office and the neglect in preventing or reporting a crime. It is also the failure to uphold the public trust, etc. Now, Inquisition policies, which have and do promote illiteracy, have negatively contributed to the human drama in North America and has been exported abroad. Misprision is a crime against humanity, violating principles of honor, and truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And violations are reflected in the stagnant social economic conditions of the world and of the peoples of the world and in human society as a whole. And the offspring of the demon colonial oppression and as expressed that denial that we see and experience. Now, logically, we're not going to go through the whole book, but we're going to give you certain key points of comprehension to understand what you're actually dealing with. And so you're dealing with a hybrid species that has maintained or is reflecting part of his heterogeneous origin, i.e., and this is what they would be referred to in their naturalist studies and anthropology as the so-called evolution from the chimpanzee by Mendelssohn, etc., and persons like that among them who talk about the origin of man, avoiding the truth of the heterogeneous experiments that took place in the mixing on the plateaus of what is now known as Mexico. Now, I'm going to try to find some parts that'll give you some keys of comprehending the operations of the heterogeneous species that we're dealing with today. So when you're understanding or comprehending what you're dealing with, your state of mind changes. And what we're sharing today is only to remove some of the fog or some of the mystery about the dynamics of the human condition that we're suffering today, so that we can become more responsible and more erudite and more competent in our analysis of the geopolitics that is affecting humanity today, having a comprehension of what you're actually dealing with. And so we'll deal with disease and rejection as an example, right? So a variable period of intersocialization between the natural peoples with the humanoid logically brought about curiosity and some intermixing, and in many other instances, out fighting, which you will see, and the rejection of the troglodytes. The troglodytes is referring to the heterogeneous hybrids that are now known publicly as the Europeans that we refer to as the Europeans today. This is the constant wars that have been going on from the ancient Punic Wars on up to the Battle of Poitiers, France, the Christian Crusades, etc., etc., etc. This is the basis. You need to understand that. And so those are referred to as troglodytes, the heterogeneous hybrids. And so logically, it brought about curiosity because people are constantly trying to analyze politically why things are going on today as they're going on, why the hybrid Europeans are so contrary to the Asiatic people. What is the that ancient hatred that is expressed against humanity and expressed against Aboriginal people, and why we've been so mistreated by the Albions, i.e., that you know today as Europeans, etc. So you need to understand that they're actually the descendants of the heterogeneous hybrids. That is also referred to in the book of Genesis, metaphorically with Rebecca's sons, Yakub and Esau, etc. And that creation of what is referred to is the different peoples or the different nations. You'll see that in the Genesis, etc. And so that's actually the Abrida, right? So the Abrida is also what you would refer to as hybrid. So Abrida actually means the hybrid. And that in the hybrid is the troglodyte. And the troglodyte is the Albion Europeans. All right. So the hybrids also attracted, a plural, right? Pardon me. And because of the print is so small, I'm actually using a magnifying glass to read it. So excuse the hesitation. I just want to make sure that I'm reading it to you properly. And so the troglodyte rejection, which is abnormal general disorder, and of course they brought about diseases, etc. This is why wherever the Albions have gone in the past centuries, they brought diseases with them. The masses of the Aboriginal people were not aware that they were actually heterogeneous hybrids. They just looked at them as having pale skins, understanding that they evolved from what is known as the Paleoliths. So the Paleoliths is actually heterogeneous hybrids that are actually the modern day Europeans, which have been mixed over the millennia that evolved today. And so the hybrids also attracted a plura. Now, a plura is actually lice, and their sebaceous glands produced pungent odors, and distress of the central the distress began to creep into the once peaceful societies of the Moabite indigenous or indigenes of Central and Southwest. And aside from the logistical problems created by and from these diseases, education and socialization, so new uncharted diseases appeared from among the niggers. And keep in mind, the niggers are actually the troglodyte nigger, or known as the troglodytes, etc. Now, the troglodyte nigger is the scientific name for the anthropoid Pongidae species that you know is gorilla and monkey. And that's where the name nigger actually has its origin. It is actually from the Pongidae, and it's adopted to the Albion, heterogeneous Ibri, etc., which you know today as the Europeans. That's the foundation of the problems that humanity has been having with the European nations that are loosely referred to on the planet as Rome or the Roman order, also known as the Roman Curia. Their political operations is known as the Roman Curia. Their operations from a political projection of power actually is what the people refer to as the Roman bullas, bullas. And so those are the dictates from the popes of Rome, and that's where you have these ancient wars from past to present to presence, which is referred to as the wars of Rome against the Moabite bloodline, loosely referred to the battle between Rome and Jesus. That's simply a loose or very elementary way of talking about the ancient wars among the human families. The wars against Rome and against the ancient Moabite bloodline, just simply referred to as Rome, i.e., assassinating the Jesus bloodline. That's loosely what they're telling you, because that's really what's going on. And so when you really understand the actual sociology, the state of your mind will change, and a lot of the ancient hatreds you will find totally unnecessary and actually evolving from misinformation and misprision. And so we need people to start thinking more objectively and more intelligently relative to what they're actually dealing with, dispensed and disposed from what they assumed to be the truth. This is why this information is generally not shared with the public, but is only held in secret societies for the power control of those who have been misruling the world. The Moorish movement is put in place to help bring some remedy. However, the truth is uncomfortable because it disposes of a lot of misconceptions that people have evolved with in the name of education, which was really mind control to maintain the powers of the Roman order and the Roman Curia on planet Midgard, which is the name of this particular earth. So the Moorish movement is in place to help cure some of those problems, to help unwind the yard of deception and lies that have been imposed upon humanity. That's why we're sharing this information with you today that has been held back by those who have been ruling you from all of the governmental orders on the planet. Now, in relationship to that, the nigger socialization, etc., is put in place to infect the populace at large. And the identified strains that predominated the scientists' concerns were these. 1, gonorrhea, that's A. B, syphilis and tuberculosis. Now, gonorrhea is an infectious and inflammatory disease that causes a discharge of mucus from the membrane of the urethra and the urinary tract, etc. Of the vagina and from the cervix, etc. And it often causes very painful and difficult urination. Syphilis is the chronic infection, being a venereal disease caused by a spirochete, actually called treponema, pallidum, yes, and is transmitted by direct contact, usually sexual intercourse, and progressing through 3 stages. And these stages are respectively characterized by local formations of chancres or ulcerous skin eruptions and systematic infections leading to general paresis. And tuberculosis is a communicable disease of man and animals caused by the microorganisms, bacterium tuberculosis, and manifesting itself in lesions of the lungs, bone, and other parts of the body. It is also called consumption or pulmonary tuberculosis. And those are some of the problems that was caused by the heterogeneous or the troglodyte niggers being mixed into the general populace of the human family. And this has much to do with what you see taking place in these modern days, where the troglodyte nigger Roman order descendants have been experimenting with biochemistry, etc. And this is why you see them going around to the different Asiatics of the world among the indigenous population and planting viruses. This is part of their vengeance or part of their anger with the ancient Moabite nation, which they have been trying to exterminate to take over the planet. Might sound kind of odd to you, but that's the foundation of the ancient hatreds, etc. Now, this is also why among the ancient priesthood which one of the major figures among the ancient matriarchy was Mor-Luakanil. And this is where you also get short Mor. It is spelled M-U-U-R. And so M-O-O-R is the modern dispensation of M-U-U-R. But keep in mind the vowels are interchangeable. And so when you're talking more, M-U-U-R, you're talking the ancient matriarchy. When you're saying M-O-O-R, you're talking same nation of the Asiatic nation in the modern world, i.e., that we are the descendants of the ancient Moabites, and this is the Moorish today. Now, part of the problems that we're having is that the nations of the world are coming to terminal points. And when we say terminal points, that means threats are now being manifest among humanity that threaten civilization itself. And this is due to the Roman order or the Roman Curia attacking the Asiatic nations from the north to the south, from the east to the west. And this is where you have the disorders that are taking place today around the planet. And this is why you see this constant confusion, particularly amongst the people who have been subjected to the abuses of color of government and has been headed by the synagogue of Satan through their corporate operations known as the United States Corporation Company that right now is headed by or administrated by the figurehead known as Donald Trump, etc. Now, knowing or having some adeptus background, you can understand the conflict that he as a personal is going through, trying to play these multiple roles with the pretext of their corporate order being funded and being misrepresented as the country, which it is not, and actually being owned by the synagogue of Satan. And this is where you're referring to in the book of Revelation, where it talks about the revelation of those who claiming to be Jews and are not Jews, who actually own the corporation. And modern day, this is what is known as Israel. So in order to really understand the politics that you're dealing with, I just gave you an archaic background of the heterogeneous hybrid known as the troglodyte nigger, which is modernly known as the Albion and known as the Europeans, etc. That's the Albion Europeans, and this is the political problems that you're experiencing today. Those who knew the real history, this is why you were told not to amalgamate with the troglodyte nigger. And so those who knew the real history knew really why you were told not to intermix with them, because their mission would be to destroy humanity. It's an unfortunate reality, but I just told you the truth. Once you know the truth, your mind changes, and logically, your state of mind changes, and therefore your motives of operations change. But you also understand the conflicts that has taken place among the nations of the planet, and also you understand some of the motivations that are projected, i.e., by the synagogue of Satan through their corporate operations known as the United States Corporation Company, that has been misrepresented as the country since 1862. Prime Minister, would you have anything to add to that?
Yes, Grand Shiga. So what I wanted to do with the audiences, because since, this was audience were the ones that requested this particular podcast, I wanted to have a couple opening questions for you all in the audience, and then you could put in the chat. But in the beginning, I just want you, before we continue on finishing this particular episode of the Yakub Experiment, and I know one of my favorite people, Sister BJ Ill, is loving this because this is one of her favorite books. It's the Yakub Experiment. But before that, I want you to, in yourself, do you believe that the Yakub Experiment, and this is for the audience, you could just type in the chat, is it fact, fiction, sacred science, symbolic history, or a mixture of those? No, not for you, Grancy. This is for the audience. And then we're gonna get back to you. I'm just putting this out there for the audience because you're giving a lot of information today. I want them to do that. All right, and this is not an argument for record, because remember, when you're learning, everyone, the prophet said, that all of us have our point of view, right? Everyone has their point of view. So it gives to us is not the same for everyone. So we're asking you your point of view on this. And then the real question behind this is, when people hear the name Yakub, many people respond by the teachings. Some say they heard of Yakub the scientist. Some say that they heard that he created new people. Some say that he's connected to Yakub, which we know is Jacob, translated by the Europeans, right, in Genesis. Okay, so these are just some of the things that I had in my notes that I wanted to put out there for us to have a really good discussion. Some connect the account with the teachings of the Nation of Islam. Do you connect it with the Nation of Islam? Some have heard this story only through criticism. But tonight we're talking about the actual book, the Yakub Experiment and History. And as Ty said, he gave you references of information from the Library of Congress where you could go. But why do you think the European is trying so hard to hide their history? Because right now, they're trying to completely erase our history. And the good thing about erasers is that they leave traces.
Yes.
Right? So if you erase something, you leave a trace behind, right? So they're trying in this particular government right now to erase all of our history. A lot of people are questioning the word black. A lot of people are questioning the European. Are they human or non-human? And why they fought so hard to amalgamate with us, because, once they amalgamate with us and get enough of us, our blood, where they feel like they survived, then they start backing away from us, as you can see they're doing right now.
Now you know the motive.
Right. So that
now you know the motive.
Right. So that's some of the things. So we have to look at that. We know we hear a lot of things under Black history, and what bothers me is a lot of Moors try to separate themselves from the historical information. Some people have not waken up to the fact that they're just not Black. I mean, everybody in their own due time. Some people are questioning. Some people have questions about it. But some people have not waken up to the fact that they're not Black until you actually show them why they're not Black. You have to literally have a class on getting people to understand the reason you could never be those things that the slavery did. A classification of people have changed it to the fact right now, Taj, there's videos out where there's a European woman and an Asiatic woman both talking the same information about why you cannot be African American, but they're not saying why you cannot be Black. And the interesting thing is a lot of people are falling for the okie doke because they want to separate themselves from Africa. But the problem is they're trying to cause division. If you're not a seeker, if you're not, mind is not wide open, they're trying to separate us from our brothers and sisters in Africa by telling us, oh, you're not African because of ... We already know. And then they're saying that they know people were already here. We know we were already here. They're saying that the indigenous people were already here. The so-called Aborigines people were already here too with us. They're saying that only some of us came from the Africa. We already know all of that. They're not telling us things that some of us who actually study or scholars didn't know. But the bottom line is they're trying to disconnect you from Africa. Now we know we're not African Americans. We know we can't be two continents. But you have to ask yourself, if you are from Africa, what nation in Africa are you from or do you relate to? And that is the big question. So, because the Europeans' history is very short history, they try to act like it's a long history. Because we know they are creation. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. They were created. They were not physically born like you and I were born. They were created out of people amalgamating and having birth, because we know all life has to have a birth process.
That's called
their birth process started right with amalgamation of animals. It did not start with human to human. And so this is why when they talk about the whole experiment, they're talking about themselves, not us.
Exactly.
They're an experiment. But the thing is, they try to make it like we are the monkeys. We are the experiment. Everything they throw it back on us that they don't want to accept for themselves. There's a lot of questions that people may have. So is this real? This really happened? Is that the truth about the Yakub experiment? The European will never admit to being born from animals, but they
Yes,
will
they
try
do.
to say that we
Explain.
all evoluted from animals, evolution from animals, but they'll never accept their birth. Why is that, you think, Taj? Why is that they'll try to mix us up constantly, but they'll never take acceptance of who they are? And not people, every time you lay down with one of them, you're laying down with a beast, literally, because just because they have genetically changed over time does not alter their original DNA. Rashid, Mike is open to you.
Now, those of you, particularly, we know that most of the scholars already have a library in their homes. So those of you who are adepts, you already know this. But our message is mainly to those who have this information has been held back from. So go to your library and get your older Oxford Dictionary and go look up the word hybrid. And then go down to entry number 8, and you will find them saying, at best, we English are but heterogeneous hybrids. That will not be in your modern dictionary, as it has been removed because it reveals ancient history and biological experimentation at Plateau Negra, which is actually in Mexico. And this is those areas where the jungles were allowed to grow over the ancient, i.e., scientific plateaus, etc., and why the anthropologists do not open up those ancient cities that reveal what Charles Darwin refers to as the origin of man through the monkey, when it's actually the heterogeneous hybrida experiments, which is known as the Yakubian experiments. Now, as you already know, those who know from the congressional records, those who know that it comes from Yakub Caucasus, and this is where you get the middle name of Yakub Caucasus. That's where you get the modern term that is used as Caucasian, which is actually the Albion off-breed or offspring of that breed. And it's Caucasus actually is the Cushite family, etc., the ancient Moabite. And logically, that's your the name given to the children of Yakub that's expressed in the book of both Revelation of the Septuaginta and the Bible, and also dealing with that ruddy, hairy redskin that's referred to as the offspring of Rebecca, i.e., in the book of Genesis. So that's important to understand that. Also, for many people, and it's not so much in your current contemporary history. This is why many of the Asiatics were a little bit of kind of taken aback when they would experience some of the Albions whenever they were in a human or a humid environment, and they would say that they smelt like a monkey or dog, and that is the oil from the sebaceous gland, so you know the origin of it. So you don't look at it as offensive, and you don't necessarily project a negative to the hybrid, but understanding that that's the oil from the sebaceous gland, although the hair has been removed, etc. And this is why many of the Albions would be, some of them still maintain a very, very hairy body. That's from their heterogeneous origin, because basically the anthropoid or the Pongidae species has most of the DNA that matches the human, roughly 97.5% to 98%, and the other 2% is not human. But the blending of the two is the heterogeneous experiment, etc. And the result of that heterogeneous experiment is the anthropoid, is what is known in ancient Moabite history as the Albion. And they were taken to also the perfecting of the experiment was moved from the area of Mexico to what is now known as Argentina, which was known as Patagonia during the ancient world. That area was known as Patagonia. And then they were moved to the Iberian Peninsula of the ancient Moabites on the other side of the water. And that area is now known as Europe. So what is known as Europe today is actually Iberia. So it's now you're dealing with the geography. And so knowing that, you also understand the wars that evolved between the ancient Moabite descendants, i.e. of ancient Hukupta, and which is now known as Egypt, etc., and what you call the Mediterranean seas, and also one of the more modern, according to Moorish history, what you call Gibra Tarik. That means the great mountain of Tarik, the great Moorish general, and it is called the Rock of Gibraltar today. And that'll give you a better concept of understanding the wars of the modern days between the Albion, or the heterogeneous hybrids, and the Asiatic Phoenician tribes of people from the south to the north, to the east, to the west, all over the planet. Yield the floor back to you, Prime Minister.
All right, Grand Sheik. All right, so today we're talking about the Yakub Experiment, and as Taj held up earlier, the book on Yakub, we wanted to go over some definitions on information, because a lot of times people don't really understand, the definitions. And so one of the definitions you wanted to make sure was correct, Grand Sheik, was that the troglodyte nigger. So with the definition for troglodyte nigger, did you want to go ahead and explain that definition of the troglodyte nigger?
Troglodyte nigger, go into your Oxford dictionary, or when your older dictionaries, you look up hybrid. These are the words you look up. Hybrid, and hybrid will take you into the etymology. And those of you have an etymology dictionary on the English language, then it will go into the scientific name for the anthropoid. And the anthropoid is the Pongidae species that is known as gorilla and monkey, i.e., and that scientific name for that species is troglodyte nigger. That's where the word troglodyte, when it's applied to cavemen loosely, that's where it comes from. And nigger is the scientific name for monkey. Now, when the hybrid Europeans, in their series of wars over the centuries with the Moabite tribes, or in the north and the south, east and western hemisphere, etc., also known as indigenous peoples, etc., that's the origin of them trying to find their place or take their place, i.e., because logically now they're conflicting species because they actually have no homeland. And this is why the hybrid Europeans have been through what you would call these last millennia, conquering the world, going to and fro the earth, devouring nations, stealing. That's why they steal. That's why they murder. Now, keep in mind, when you study the Pongidae species among the monkeys, that's what they do actually in their nature. And this is why a lot of the Asiatics around the planet have a mental conflict of trying to comprehend the beastly nature of the Albion peoples, that they refer to in these days as the Europeans. Everywhere they go, they bring disease, and also wars. So now you know why, and you know its origin. Even when you understand, when you deal with the Moabite history and Moorish history and European history, now you have a better concept of the political motivation of what is known as the Renaissance. It has a actual original political motive that was intended to do what? Civilize the Albion. Because by default, they exist. So you got to deal with it. And logically, because of their beastly nature, this causes absolute conflict. So people, to cover it up, the hybrid Europeans would deal with the Carlos Linnaeus mind control mentality of what they would call the phenotype, i.e., of the evolutionary processes of the troglodyte nigger, and they would call it the race operations. Though this is where you get the dynamics of the socialization and the general socialization of what they call race, and the politics behind it is loosely referred to, though improper, called racism. When you understand the real origin of this, you can be more objective in starting to deal with solutions, because the problem hasn't gone away. However, in order to solve problems, you got to deal with things more scientifically. Therefore, it is important for you to understand the Hybrida experiments, etc., which is known as the Yakubian experiments of ancient Mexico, which is the origin of the hybrid breed known as the Albion from Caucasus, i.e. Yakub Caucasus, that you know today as Caucasians. This is the origin of the problems. So it's kind of like uncomfortable, but you got to deal with truth in order to start solving human problems. Yield the floor, doctor.
Yes, so Taj, in the Yakub experiment, I wanted to know if you could get into the hybrid first appearances on pages 10 and 11. Could you go through that on page 10 and 11?
On this one?
Yes. No, in the Yakub.
The nigger problem?
Yakub.
All right.
Yes. And if you do have this book, you can follow along with us. And if not, you can certainly order the book from circle7publishing.com. Both of those books are very important information-wise. And the reason we have such small pamphlets for you all is because I remember the Prophet Noble Drew'ali saying, this was teaching from my grandparents, that if he put in a big book, you wouldn't read it. But if he broke it down
simple.
Yeah, keep it
and
simple.
Like it said in the Library of Congress, truth need not be told in a multitude of words.
Absolutely.
You know, and so this is one of the motivations of the Europeans in order to reconstruct. They call it period of reconstruction. This has much to do with the meeting, the great meeting that they had amongst the leaders of the Circle Church and Chantry and the British Accredited Registry, i.e., and the oligarchs of the Europeans who are operating at North America. And that great meeting they had of altering the history was called the Whigs Convention at Philadelphia in 1854. And this is also when they started referring to themselves as white people officially, although they did it loosely. That's why that convention at Philadelphia is so important, led by Horace Greeley, which is a newspaper tycoon from New York that came down to help modify and alter their operations under the Roman Curia bullas, etc. And this is where the deception of people's concepts of what they thought was the country distinguished from the nation, where people don't know that country and nation don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Absolutely.
And so they mixed the two. And this is where why people think that the United States, which is actually the Union State Society of the Hybrida operations of the Roman Curia, that has been fronting as the nation, which is actually a corporate operations pretending to be a country. And actually, a lot of the politics was initiated by George Washington, who was the ninth praetor for the corporation, etc. This is why they hide the history of John Hanson on up to Arthur St. Clair. So we already know that. Then you get into the politics of what they call the founding fathers operations, which is actually reconstructed history. But anyway, let's go back to the literature.
Yes.
Now, so you're dealing with the first appearance of the hybrid. That's the hybrida hybrid, right? So the European hybrid man first appeared 6,000 years ago on the island of Patmos, which is referred to in the Bible, or which is also known as Pelan, Pelan. That's also known as Patmos in the Bible. In the Aegean Sea, where, where these beings were created by a 600-year process of selective breeding called grafting, quote unquote, under the command of an Asiatic scientist named Yakub etc., Caucasus Cushitis. The 60,000-year Asiatics who followed Yakub to the island were placed under a system of mating that was based on skin complexion, in which only lighter complexioned babies were allowed to survive. And over the course of many generations, the population of Patmos began to grow lighter and lighter. And after 600 years, the people became very pale and with blue eyes and blonde hair, also known as the ruddy-skinned ones. And from this island-based tribe of European hybrids or hybrid-skinned albinos came a behaviorally aggressive race of rulers, namely the Caucasians, who then spread into every corner of the world and who now represent 9% of the world's populations, 1 in every 11 human beings. The teaching of the birth of the European hybrid race has been the central belief system that was taught by Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. And this teaching has been met with hostility and profound resistance by its critics, who termed it hate teaching, which it is not. It is actually some of the added knowledge known by all secret societies, all governments, etc., and has been operatively, logically part of the problems that people have who really don't know the real human condition. They're looking at the symptoms or dealing with the symptoms of this hidden history, and therefore think it's an attitude, when actually is dealing with the complexity of the bestial nature of the heterogeneous hybrids from Europe who have been attacking the Aboriginal peoples all over the planet. logically with some of the problems that we're having today with the nations on the purpose of trying to survive or maintain some level of organized civil order, which is now under threat. This is why you see the nations of the earth in these days starting to dump U.S. Treasury bonds. The U.S. Treasury bonds are under the political jurisdiction of the United States Corporation Company that's owned and controlled by what is known as a branch of the synagogue of Satan, which is also known as the banking cartel, which is owned by the United States Corporation Company, which is last registration in Florida in 1925, which is known by the Khazarian Mafia, which is known by their home base of operations after the Second World War, established in Palestine, now known as Israel, which is actually the owners of the corporation. That is the political mystery that is buried from the general public. But when you know that, your concepts of how you look at things and how you will deal with things in the near future will also be more, favorable on your behalf when you're coming from the truth of the condition, as opposed from the reconstructed misconceptions of history, because the truth has to be told for us to start solving these political, social, and economic problems that has affected the Asiatic nation and all Aboriginal peoples around the planet. Thus, you got to know the truth about the troglodyte nigger and the Yakubian experiments and the modern day problems with the geopolitical contradictions that are affecting every nation on the planet. And those nation states now, by necessity, not because they're all of a sudden moral or not because they're all of a sudden ethical, but by necessity of their economic salvation, are dumping as quickly as they can, but as quietly as they can, all U.S. Treasury bonds that have been established since 1872 to fund the Khazarian Mafia or the synagogue of Satan that is now threatening all of humanity, etc. I yield the floor, Prime Minister.
All right, Shukran, Grand Sheik, and yes, and so we know that a lot of times, a lot of things that we say and the things, one of the big things that people try to do with Moors is try to make it like, we're nobody, that we make up everything, but things that are fact are fact. And one of the things, if the European was not so afraid of the amount of knowledge that people are awakening to, they wouldn't be trying to erase things right now. We know back during ancient times, they cut off the noses of our statues and try to take away the lips so that they would try to distort the figure of the statues, a lot of them that they could not destroy. A lot of them, they took statues and replaced our statues with their statues. So this is nothing new for them. They've been erasing our history, our legacy for years and years and years. And that's why it's his story and not history. This is one of the reasons why I teach the children that it's legacy. Because when you're talking about history, his story, you're talking about it from another individual's point of view. Now, I know a lot of people try to include that the Yakub experiment everywhere you look with the Nation of Islam, but you know that Elisha learned this information that he got about Yakub from the Moorish Science Temple.
Interjection.
Yes.
Elijah Muhammad is Elijah Poole Bey,
yes,
adept from the Moorish Divine and National Movement, student of Noble Drew Ali.
He never
also can be found in the Library of Congress in what is called the History of American Religions. When he first broke off, it was called the Temple of Allah.
Yes.
Then it was called Muhammad's Mosque. Then it was called Nation of Islam. That knowledge actually comes from the adept chamber of the Moorish Divine and National Movement from the Moorish Temple of Science under Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali, known in these times by the congressional records as Noble Drew Ali. Yield the floor.
Yes, and so what I wanted to say, he never made the adept chamber, But one of the things that he did is because, the European, that they try to make God in person, I saw every time I think about them replacing a blonde-haired, blue-eyed figure for a dark-haired, pale Russian figure, trying to make this man God in person, it's just serving one European figure for another. It's no better. And so when they try to say, oh, well, one sister wanted to physically fight me physically because I let her know that the man that they were calling God in person was a European, and he was not any type of God, and that he tried to infiltrate the Moorish Science Temple. And because he was not able to infiltrate it, he was angry. So he went out trying to start his own movement, but people wasn't following him because he was a European. So Elisha got with him, and they decided to work together. And when he ran off because he was under investigation by the FBI and all those other bureaus, he ran off and left Elisha with the actual members. And this is how Elisha became head of the mosque. Elisha was not head of the mosque. Generally, it was this European he was following. But they all wore fezzes, and they all had, a law. He had made the fezzes, all of them with the law on it. That was all, him. I don't even like to say his name because he's just to me, it's an insult to Islam. The bottom line is that he literally, when his son for him, Elisha's son for him, and said, Father, I don't believe that that a European can be head of any Islamic organization against the Asiatic so-called black man, as they were saying it back then, is when him and Elisha had their fallout. Because that European is who Elisha was following. A lot of people want to hide the truth. That's the people for the Nation of Islam. They want to hide the truth. People that are in more science, I'm not sure why they want to hide a lot of the truth, because listen, it doesn't do you any good to hide the truth. You take it with you into your grave, and no one ever gets to hear the information because you took it with you. And then you leave the minds of people, like myself. I was very fortunate to have family, that taught me. I was able to teach it to you, that they taught me, the information. You know what I'm saying? Because if I didn't get this information, you didn't get this information, a lot of people that listen to us would not have it. And a lot of sheiks or grand sheiks or people who are not even sheiks that put themselves in positions think that they could keep everybody on that road to Christianity. When if you really study the true foundation of Christianity, you wouldn't want to take your people down that road, knowing that the beginning of Christianity for us is in slavery. Not the beginning of Christianity of its origin, but the beginning of Christianity imposed on us started in slavery. So it's a slave man's religion that they try to impose on us. So now when we try to tell them things about the Yakub Experiment, when we try to tell them the history of the Nation of Islam, where they all came out of the Moorish Science Temple, when we tell them about the information about Prophet DrewAli founded the Moorish Science Temple and how his journey was, when we tell them about the reincarnated prophet John Gibbons Ill and his mission, because if it wasn't for him continuously on moving, I don't think that me and my family would even exist today. Because the bottom line is that my parents followed, my great-grandmother was Marcus Garvey, a Garveyite, but she knew that we weren't Negro, black, and colored. And she was like, that's not so-called it. But when she followed from Marcus Garvey over to the founder, Prophet DrewAli, she felt settled. Her and my Uncle Sid, her brother. And then when they first decided, you know what, this is for us, we're going to teach this to our children, that's what they did. So generationally, I'm really fortunate, because my family was like, oh, this is the right call, because they're really originally from this islands of Trinidad. So a lot of this information, they already had a lot of this information, old records, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So everything the Prophet DrewAli was saying made sense to them. So they was able to follow him on and pass it on to my family, which literally passed it on to me. I was able to share it with you. And now our family that we created together have this information, and now our grandchildren. So we've been really fortunate. But what about those who have not had our pathway and they're being so misled today? There's all these organizations that have come up who literally hide the truth, and they don't want to teach the truth to the people. They want to continuously tell them lies. I don't understand the whole reason behind just not being truthful, because listen, we've been lied to long enough. Them Europeans been lying to us since they came connection with us. That's why our forefathers called them pale face with forked tongues, because they've never been able to tell the truth. So why is it now that we trying to give them a platform for telling the truth, and everyone is running to them like they have the absolute truth, and they rather listen to them than us? And one thing I want to say, what the Prophet DrewAli said, my grandmother used to put it in our head every Sunday. She would push it in your head. The Prophet DrewAli said this: if the Europeans got on the top of the mountain and hollered to all of us, you're not Negro, black, and colored, that you're Asiatic by origin, that you're Moorish by nationality, that you have a birthright, that you're home on your own land. If he was to holler that from the mountaintop, we would follow. But it takes someone that look like you and I to stay on the same mountaintop and say the same information, you won't even get 10 to follow you, because they don't want to hear it from us. We're so programmed by the European, we just want to hear it from them. And let me add this. The reason why I know what the prophet said is so valid, I was explaining to you earlier in the introduction of this video, this podcast that we're doing, that we literally see a European on TikTok telling us the same information, that we're not African Americans. She was trying to sell us why we are the Aboriginal people here, but she still was trying to call us black. And you should see the amount of people that was listening to her when you look at her numbers. And then you have an Asiatic that they're using. It's probably all AI. An Asiatic woman saying the same exact thing, Taj, same exact thing, and her numbers are less. That shows you what the prophet had said is so true. And for me, because this is a man that was created by us by an experiment, why are we so amped to listen to what they have to say versus to what we have to say? And the one thing about those European organizations that lie about us and to us to our face, they pay each other. They fund each other. They keep perpetuating the lie, and they keep the fiat going. But for us, we seem like we have a hard time just donating 50 cents to $1 or anything to help us continue to teach the truth about ourselves. The Prophet DrewAli was very, very clear. He said, be yourself and not someone else. I'm not sure what that means to others, but I know what it means to me. It means to be all of me. Tosh, can you help us understand what you're talking about? What does that mean to you?
Yes. You know, Prime Minister.
Yes.
The question is clearly answered, and this is back to in the Bible in the Revelation, right? When it refers to, as an example, look at Revelation 3.9, and look at those who belong to the synagogue of Satan. I won't read it because I don't have a Septuagint with me right now, but for those who are listening, write this down. Book of Revelation 3.9. And those who belong to the synagogue of Satan, that's what you're battling right now. Okay. Now, in relationship to why the people think the way they think, reference to the skull and bones operation of John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, 1902, after they murdered Winona at Philadelphia. And they set up what is known as the General Education Board. Read the philosophy page. That's why the people think the way they think. That's why they don't believe us. Do you understand? That's why the Moorish movement is in place to counter. That's what Wilson was saying to DrewAli about he don't believe that, that the people that he would tend to follow. Why? Because long as he has the churches and the school open, the people don't know that the church and the school are weapons of the circle, church, and chancery. The people believe they were there to help the people. They're not there to make the people erudite. They're there to teach, or what is called animal husbandry training, which is commonly known as education. It's not that education as a principle is incorrect in what the word means to draw out. but it's actually been weaponized. The people don't know the history and not the motive. So for those of you listening, write down philosophy page of the General Education Board, and that will tell you why it's difficult, Prime Minister, when you're telling the people the truth. And also in the nature, when you're referring to the Temple of Allah, which became Muhammad's mosque, of which Wallace, son of Elijah, why he left, and also what became problematic with Malik, that they know as Malcolm X, is because he found out this information.
Yes.
And logically, those who have been benefiting from the misrepresentation and fraud, many of them who are innocent in the Nation of Islam, were being tainted by the exposure of this information, which is why many of them don't talk about, when they're talking about the Yakub Experiment, why they don't necessarily refer to the modern politics connecting to it, which is why what we're talking about, and which makes it such a sensitive subject matter, because people who by association can be tainted by it, which is why they hide it. Not that they're part of the corruption, is because of the influence by association. So keep that in mind. That's another reason why we're sharing this information, because in order to promote unity amongst the Asiatic world, they have to know the truth of the history of what got you to where you are today, and what is the motivations that underlies many people's economic and political motivations today, whether they're part of the United States Corporation Company operations of the Circle Church and Chancery and the Synagogue of Satan, or whether they're part of the different organizations among the Asiatic nation that have been working towards helping to liberate our people. That's the conflict. That's another reason why, as you talked to me before, Prime Minister, why we're sharing some of this information. And logically, this is why we're hitting certain keys, because it's a new study. And this is back to people misunderstanding, but hearing about or having an idea about why secret societies exist. Why do people belong to secret societies like Knights Templars, Daughters of American Revolution? Why all the Europeans are in government happen to be members of Knights of Columbus? What are their motivations? Why this kind of information is not talked about publicly? It's obvious that they can't maintain colonial operations if the people understand the real history, because they have to control the minds of the people to rule over them jurisdictionally, whether you're talking about political office, whether you're talking about judicial authorities, whether you talk about wardship tenures and the authority that people in the municipalities have been having over the everyday people who don't understand the different levels of what is known as citizenship, why it's not really taught. They hear the word citizen without the instruction on the different levels and the obligations of the Naturalization Act. That's why they don't teach it. These are operations of government that logically people who are sincere to help the people come into conflict once they get some of the adeptus knowledge. This is what happened to Malcolm X. This is why nobody really talks in real detail on the motives of his assassination. Even Wallace, Elijah's son, why he left, same reasons, no different. So, the motive has been political power. We know what the motive is. But if we give people some of the information of the because a lot of this information that we spoke of is in the Library of Congress, but it's not available to the public without certified application. And unless they're part of the secret societies, i.e., or if they're honorable and a member of the Great Seal, it's allowed to them. And unless somebody exposes it to them, they don't even know that this information is available, because it's hidden from the public. This goes back to the mission of the General Education Board with John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates. That's why you got to tie them things together. And from a political perspective, to, for the average person, for available information that's generally available, that's why we'd always refer to them to read the William Dungy case and the Dred Scott case to put perspective together. Then this information makes sense. But if they don't know that, they get caught up in whoever's controlling their so-called education. So therefore, when someone comes to them with adeptus information, it contradicts logically, if you get the point. But and while the people will say they're miseducated, they actually use the miseducation to try to exercise education. See the conflict? That's why it's difficult when people like yourself or others expose the adeptus information that's generally known amongst all politicians, but not the public, because the public don't believe they're enslaved. It's the problem that slaves don't know they're slaves. And then plus it involves when you expose this information, it attacks their ego. So they think that you're attacking them personally when actually you're trying to uplift them. So this is the political social conflict that all people who actually want to help humanity have. They come to them with the life raft of knowledge, and the people reject it because they believe the synagogue of Satan, not knowing that the synagogue of Satan actually runs the education board. So this is the dynamics, so it's sort of like comprehending what you're dealing with. And that's why it takes, like DrewAli said, he wants brave men and women. Why? Because as soon as you start revealing this information, you're going to be attacked. And even though a lot of it's documented, they didn't burn everything. Like you said, they leave a trail because they can't get rid of it all. So what they would do, then when they, as a matter of fact, the Smithsonian Institute was established for that very purpose, to bury archaeological history that would clearly reveal this. This is why they don't do what you call anthropological dispensation of those the plateaus in Mexico, because it would connect the ancient world, and they would see that the ancient world of Egypt is actually here on the north. So they have to make that disconnection. That's why they keep people out of the Grand Canyon. That's why they keep people out of the tunnels in Tennessee. But anthropologists and people who really know scholarly history, it's like talking to a wall when you talk to the average person who's been subject to the mind control operations of the Circle Church and Chancery, because they don't know that the General Education Board is skull and bones operations of the Rockefeller family. You understand what's, because they think that they're in debt for an education. They don't know that it's animal husbandry. And logically, it makes people uncomfortable when you talk on an atom level, because it's alien to them. Yet it's their actual history. It is their actual history. And so to cover it up, this is why they established the Circle Church and Chancery members started what they call Black History Month in order to promote the Whigs Convention of 1854. So they think that Black history means the uplifting of the Asiatic nation, when it actually means the promotion of the Paleolith, because Black is Middle English, which means pale colors. They think it means melanin. So this is, again, why one of the reasons or motivations of even you years ago starting the school, and why, starting with your own children.
Yes.
And then at the same time, people think that you're attacking them personally when you're actually throwing them an intellectual life raft. But until they get some of the adeptus information, they're locked in because they can only hold on to what they've been presented from childhood. That's why you got to give them the philosophy page of the skull and bones operations of John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, which is known as the General Education Board, where the Europeans tell you themselves that they're miseducating you. So I always say, that's why I always say, don't argue with people because you're arguing against a wall that was built a century before we were even, in our bodies. But you can give them their own documents, which exposes them. That's one of the reasons why I, like years ago, even knowing, a lot of this information before, because, I grew up with my father was always a reader. That's why in 1979, when I said to you, when you were telling me to come to the temple, I said, I'm going to come in fighting. Why? Because I already knew there were traitors there, even though I never even walked in the temple. As soon as I saw DrewAli's letters and information, I already knew what I was in for a fight. This is why in 1982, I founded Moore's Order of the Round Table, because I already knew I was going to go into a clash. Therefore, they would not have control over me socially to block me, because I already knew when I came in that what I already knew, that if I put it, because I was always a writer, I wrote poetry when I was 7.5 years old. So I already knew that if I came in and started talking, that I would have pushback. So if I founded the round table and started sharing information, they can't block it because it don't come from them. You see the whole point? But this is just like everything else. When people find out what's really going on, they start leaving these institutions. That's what got Malcolm in trouble. That's what got Khalid in trouble. That's what got Wallace in trouble. And that's a whole paradigm that you're talking about, from the Temple of Allah that evolved into Muhammad's mosque, that evolved into the Nation of Islam. That is that background controversy that makes people uncomfortable. But we know the real history. We're not trying to create confusion, but we got to tell the truth in order to uplift the people, so they can protect the good that's within their organizations. You know what I mean? Because there's good in all the different organizations. But when they know the real history, they can remove the corruption, and then also join in unity to help uplift fallen humanity. But they got to know the real politics. Can't know the real politics if you don't know the real history. That's why we got to go back even beyond Moorish history and go into Moabite history of the ancient matriarch. And that's why we shared the Yakubian experiment, troglodyte nigger hominidé, because they are a hybrid. But it's no secret. It's just that the people understand that the politics that they're suffering today evolved from that. And it's back to even with the Moabites and the Moors, where we have to take accountability that we are the Moabite descendants. And those great, violations in nature, we're manifesting today. That's why DrewAli said what? What part of our fall is what? Gratifying the lower self. That's what that means. And when he said we do not amalgamate with the pale-skinned nations of Europe, that's what that really comes from, because we're living it today. We are who our ancient mothers and fathers were. And this is back to the ego that is part of everybody's nature. We have an ego. And we like to think that we're good and somebody else is bad, when we all have to take accountability. And so the accountability that we're taking is taking the responsibility of sharing the ancient Moabite matriarch information, precluding the Moorish nation that causes the suffering of the Moorish nation in these days, that are now suffering at the hands of the descendants of the Ibrida, i.e. heterogeneous hybrids, known as the Albion, known as the Cushite, i.e. experiment offspring of Yakub Experiment, etc., which we know nowadays as the Europeans. And now you know the origin of your world wars and the constant wars going back and forth to and fro the nations of the earth, devouring nations. Now you understand why the nations, in order to save themselves, are dumping the U.S. Treasury bonds as fast as they can, because you can't escape the karmic debt of the ancient world that's now suffering to the public and the private of the modern world, i.e. Yakub. I yield the floor, Prime Minister.
Islam Grand Sheikh, yes. And so, even with what we're talking about today in the Yakub Experiment, the things that we're talking about today, even with the Yakub Experiment, and, with what you were mentioning about the school, a lot of like all the Moors that are conscious today, you would think that the school would be overran with children. Donations would be pouring in, that we would be so self-sufficient that, we wouldn't have any problems. But that's not happening here. the parent, a lot of sheiks and grand sheiks or whomever they are, children are all children and grandchildren are in public schools. And a
Now,
lot in the public school education, and this is the thing with the public school education that they're getting, you want to ask yourself why your children act like they act, and you can't control them. You can't get them to wear a turban or a fez. You can't get them to eat properly. You can't get them out of the street because you're teaching them one thing. You're being contradictory about being Moorish, about, Moorish heritage and who you are. And then on the other hand, you got them in the public school system where they learning how to be Negroes.
Interject Wilson's statement every time you make that dispensation. Interject Woodrow Wilson's statement. He said, long as I keep, he said, and Coolidge, they actually, both of them made those statements. Long as they kept the churches and schools open relative to Drew Ali, said you won't get 10 to follow. That's what that stands for. So the reason, because they believe that, because they've been trained by Rome under animal husbandry. But the people don't know that the education system is animal husbandry. Logically, those who execute the human engineering, Executive Order 11590, are not going to tell them that that's an executive order of operations of human trafficking. They're not going to tell them, logically. And logically, when you expose it, they think that you're being personal. So this is why I always say, for the documents that are available, share them with the people, which is why I founded the roundtable, why you founded the schools. We have the same motivation. That's why then Drew Ali said, in order to change the people, you must change their literature.
First change their literature.
Logically, and even we can look at it as being unfair. But the European is the colonizer. He's not going to teach the colonized people about themselves. Even though it's unfair, it shouldn't be expected.
But it's an interjection.
Naive that people would think.
We can't even say it's unfair because it's not their job to teach us.
That's the point. That's the point.
Realistically, it's not their job to teach us. That's the point. So I don't think, this is my thing I've been saying for you. I've never been, and I used to get a lot of opposition when I was younger. I never felt like them not hiring me on their jobs was, unfair and all that. Maybe because I came up with a different mindset. Because if they gave me a problem on one job, one of those JOBs, I just did what? I walked away and went to what? Another one.
Yes.
If they didn't want me somewhere, I went somewhere else because was not their job to make sure that I ate. It wasn't make sure their job that I had at home or was clothed. They let us know that it's not their responsibility to do so. Even though they stole the land and took everything away from us, that is not their responsibility. It's our responsibility to get it back. But the prophet said a beggar of people can never obtain the highest in them. I think that is a very clear statement that as long as you begging another people or other people to take care of you, you'll never learn to take care of yourselves. This is why when people, like even some people have taken their children out of this school and put them back into the public school. The public school system that they should not be in because they worried about them having socialization and having friends. And my thing is, your children, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, our school is closed. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, your children can socialize with you, your family members or friends or whoever. But school should not be based on socialization. That's not the reason why schools were created. It's to erudite and create the mind to intelligence and to help to actually contribute to society, not to make for a bunch of friends and hang out and learn bad habits. But this is the things that parents want for us. So you can see where our minds are still in the dark, like literally still in the dark, because they don't think that this school is considered a school because it wasn't created by what? Europeans, because it's not accredited by European standards, because the Europeans don't approve of it. Where when they tell you in the Declaration and the International Rights of the Child, it tells you in the indigenous rights of indigenous people, it is your responsibility to educate your children in the manner you seem fit. Yet we want to holler about all these rights we have as Aborigines, indigenous people, but we don't follow them. We continuously let another people educate the minds of our children, and wonder why we haven't moved any further than we are today.
Prime Minister,
Yes.
please send them off to get the Board of Education and have him read the philosophy.
Okay, you want the philosophy page from the book we did?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I actually just took that book out of my desk. It's in the Shamsuddin, where your father's asking. The book is in the room in the box where the books are located. He wants the Pearls of Education, the book that we wrote about a year or two ago. That's the book that he wants.
And this is back, Prime Minister, to where, you know, like I would always say, when, you know, even when sometimes when you are talking and people would misunderstand, thinking that I'm defending Donald Trump, and I would say, pay attention to Donald Trump, because he's exposing the system. He's doing what he's supposed to do for the corporation. They work for the synagogue of Satan. We shouldn't expect them to do. We shouldn't expect a colonizer to liberate colonized people. It is those adepts among the Aboriginal people whose job it is to tell the people the truth. That's why DrewAli set up the old Canaanite temple, for the Moors to tell the truth. And this is back to even the infiltration that he complained about. Noble DrewAli, and he wrote himself, right, a letter to be read before every meeting, didn't he?
Yes.
And you can go to most of these temples and they won't even read that letter, will they?
No, a lot of people.
Why? Because it tells you the infiltration that he was talking about. That's the point. So even though it's frustrating, we're dealing with the geopolitical fallout. We know that the geopolitical fallout creates controversy, which is why most people get very uncomfortable when you go into the real human condition history, because it's ugly.
It's in the. I just put it in there.
It's ugly.
Yes,
and it's traumatizing. However, to solve problems, you gotta tell the truth. Truth ain't always comfortable, but it is what it is. So please read the philosophy page. And it's interesting because the truth has been redundantly shared. Now, those of you who are listening, go to your Septuaginta, and also go to the Bible and go to Revelation 3.9 and read it. And it's telling you what's happening with the geopolitics today on the planet. And the headline of the people that are creating the problems for the world is SOS. And that's not a call for help. That's a call for exposing the synagogue of Satan. Go ahead, read, Prime Minister.
Oh, Grand Sheik, I gave it to you to read. Did you want me to read it?
Yes, because as you know, because of my eye injury, I have to read slower.
Right. Okay.
I wanted Mufti to read it.
Oh, no, he's not.
But I'll read it. I'll read the philosophy page.
You sure? Because I can have him bring it to me.
No, all the time. He can read. He can bring it to you. But I'm going to go to the philosophy page. Right.
All right. Look in the table of contents. It'll tell you which.
Yes.
And just for you all to know why Grand Sheik is doing that, that's the book we wrote, and we did a video on it that you all need to support. And we did a video on that. We created that book for you all to donate to the school. So all fiat that comes from that book goes to the uplifting of our school. And so we did a video on that, I guess maybe 2 years ago now, and we're still looking for you all to support it. You know, so that's the thing. We have to continuously support. As soon as you ask our people about fiat, they run off the line. They stop coming. They don't want to service anything. They just don't want to do.
But you ought to understand that's part of the animal husbandry training. Yeah. It's disappointing, but it's part of the mind control. We know that it is. And it's sort of like, this is why DrewAli said it takes brave men and women. Why? Because it'll burn you out. It takes patience. That's why only few people, when you have the pushback, have enough love for the people to continue to work. Why? Because they will attack you. But we got to understand they're under mind control. And it's frustrating, but it's, you know, we're fighting the miseducation that all of us have suffered with. You know, so it takes love and patience. Right? Hold on. This is from the Board of Education. For those who are listening, write this down. Philosophy page of the General Education Board of 1902. And these are the skull and bone operatives that set this up. John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates.
Something happened. Hold on.
With perfect docility to our molding hands. The present educational conventions fade from their minds. Unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors or orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, or statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. The task we set before us or ourselves is very simple, as well as a very beautiful one, to train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are. So we will organize our children into a little community and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way, in the homes, in the shops, and on the farms, i.e., General Education Board Occasional Papers, number 1, The Country Schools of Tomorrow, etc., General Education Board, New York, 1913. That's the operations in every school, every college, every church, every Sunday school. That's from their own hand. That's why I would say, you know, when you try to talk to the people morally, principally, it's not that they reject it. They don't believe you because they believe Rome. There's Rome's own hand. Skull and Bones, John D. Rockefeller, Frederick T. Gates, General Education Board, and 90% of the adults that are listening to this show right now are in debt, paying student loans on an education that don't work for them. You don't have to argue it. The proof is their life experience.
Yes.
However, we know that it's very sensitive. And logically, because people have egos and we're in trauma, logically, it's people take it personal. This is a battle, a real battle for uplifting fallen humanity. This is why people who really understand what's going on are really grateful and thankful for Noble Drew Ali having the courage to establish the Moorish Divine and National Movement to help uplift fallen humanity. And this is why so many people, even people who came into the movement, misrepresent the movement because of the compromission. Because people are compromised, because it's a war against humanity. But the people don't know it. They think it's a belief. They think it's an emotion. They don't understand it's unum sanctum wars. They don't even know that the U.S. is an acronym for unum sanctum. They think it's a country. This is what makes the job for conscious Moorish Americans hard, because reality is very traumatic to people who don't know they're in trauma. Because when you tell the truth, it pulls the mask off, and people look into the mirror of their unseen selves, and it's traumatic, and it's also ugly. And it also commands that all of us have the responsibility of becoming accountable, and it's very uncomfortable. However, if you love humanity, we face it because we're not scared of Rome. Now we know why Rome lynched Jesus and why Romans have been lynching us. It's no secret. We are who our ancient mothers and fathers are. Uncomfortable sometimes, yes. But this is why when the truth comes out, institutions start collapsing. Now you understand, but we already know, the nations recognize if they don't start telling the truth, they will collapse. That's why they're dumping U.S. Treasury bonds. Why? The U.S. Treasury bonds are owned by the United States Corporation Company, which is owned by the Synagogue of Satan. And the people have been funding the wars against themselves.
It's interjection, Greshik, I'm just sitting here thinking, and you just a big old smile on my face. You know how connections make, because on Roland Martin, his audience was just saying that how you're paying for education that don't do you any good, that you're paying for education, you're sending your children to schools that you shouldn't send them to,
and they're in debt for it after they leave.
And then the children don't learn anything, from the school. They have no history of themselves or anything.
They learn, what is the philosophy page? They learn to be docile.
Yes, and so they
now
learn.
The parents are docile, and this information exposes us to ourselves, and it's not pretty. But are we really here to try to help our children, or are we here to continue to perpetrate the unum sanctum wars against humanity initiated by the Roman order Albions, i.e. commonly known in modern day as the Europeans, with their corporation known as the United States Corporation Company, owned by the Synagogue of Satan, which is also known as the Circle Church and Chancery, etc., known as the British Accredited Registry, also known as the Bar Association, whose members are the Sadducees and the Pharisees mentioned in the Bible. Get over the ego, start loving and learning how to love instead of hate, and help get, i.e., our people uplifted. And this is why we had to talk about the Yakubian experiment, heterogeneous paleolith hybrid, hybrida, etc., and the offspring of the Albions that are the troubles of today that manifest as the Synagogue of Satan, SOS. Unfortunate truth, it is the truth. I yield the floor.
All right. It's so our producer just told me to go through the comment section and then start wrapping it up. There's some things I did want to say. It's one thing I do teach the audience that watch me, Taj, is that we know Jesus is not the real name. So
Yeshua ben Yosef.
Yes, so we have to stop calling them Jesus, because
this is back to the point. This is
wait a minute.
This is why the school. Now, this is the point, because everything can't be done in these classes. Right. That's why you have the school.
Islam.
Now, we know that the letter J was not used in common linguistic structure until the 1700s. We already know Just like Yakub, they'll say Yakub, they'll say Jacob, which you qualified earlier. But we know that. And this is the problem. When you start exposing the real human history, you run against what? We start looking at these hurdles, these walls that were put up. So now you're going into the Linnaeus mind control of the phenotype structure for maintaining the order of the wigs of the Union Society that's operating at North America today, which is referred to as the Masonic secret. But you know that you can't give that to them in one lesson. Yeah. However, this is key. Rather than get caught up in the emotions of the frustration, give them key information that is researchable on their level, non-adeptus level. And that will expose the system. Then the truth becomes theirs, not just that we're sharing information with them and they're accepting it because they like us or not. It's not important. When it becomes their own and that mind changes and that snaps within their mind, then they become the new warriors for the truth, for uplifting fallen humanity. Thus, that's when they actually start gaining respect for the great work that Sheikh Sharif Abdul-Ali brought to us. It becomes their own. I always say, don't argue with them. Give them some of the records that weren't burnt. And we just shared part of the records that they weren't burnt. So anybody who's serious about helping the children, they say they love the children. All right, read the General Education Board. And if they continue to send their children to Rome and the children keep on getting messed up, now they have to take accountability. Not because you exposed it, not because I exposed it, because the world knows it. Now, we keep on pretending that we don't know that that's animal husbandry when it's very clear, because they didn't, that's public record. They have no more excuses, do they? Anyway, I yield the floor.
All right.
Have a great evening.
All right, Grand Sheik. So we're going to take some of these comments really quickly, and then we have to wrap it up. Our producer just told me to wrap it up. I just had my glasses, so I'm going to take some of these comments. And I just wanted to say also that we have online schooling for Moorish children. Taj was reading for the books. If you can hold up the books one more time, Taj. Each one of those books are available on Circle 7 Publishing.
Here's some Charles.
All of these are I apologize. Hold on, Grand Sheik. Let me keep up. All of the I'm trying to put both of us on here. I don't know if it's not showing both of us. But all right, let me go back to Grand Sheik. It kicked him off the stage. There you go. It kicked you off the stage, Grand Sheik. But right there, all those books. Can you hold them up again, Grand Sheik? All those books are on circle7publishing.com. So if you don't want to just donate to us because it's the right thing to do, you can certainly get something for your fiat. And if you have challenges trying to process your order, you can give us a call or you can give us an email. You can call us or give us an email, worldmosttalk@yahoo.com, or right there, on the information, you can call us at the school line 443-910-7739, and we'll help you process your order. All right. So we just want you to make sure you do the right thing and assist us, because we're here to uplift fallen humanity. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you as well as help ourselves. All right, we do apologize that we're going to get just some of the comments that we do have to go through, not many of them, and I do apologize that we ran out of time. For some of you all, we'll try to answer them all afterwards. Okay, so let's try to see if we can get some of these comments in here really quickly, Grand Sheik. So let's see. I'm going to try to get stuff that's not spammed all the time. So we have a few things. It's hard to know which. Okay, so it says. Okay, so this one, it says, this why Noble Drew Ali said, don't throw away the Bible yet, because it will use it to condemn them. That's right. So knowing about that Piscine record, because I don't give it no honor, it's not holy, and I certainly, it's all misrepresented in everything you find in there. You can find another book, but you can utilize that for their own detriment, because a lot of things they didn't want us to know. But we know, especially the King James Version,
even when they modify it, there's a trail of what? Trail of evidence. They can't get rid of everything.
That's right. And this one says, where do I get the classes at? So, all right. So I know some of you all wanted me to do classes, or I guess Grant Sheikh was busy scheduled to do classes. Our school is designed for children from ages 3 to 18. So if you're looking for that, we have not started adult classes yet. I've looked forward to starting adult classes, but whatever time we open up registration for adult classes, we don't get any registration for adults.
This is the difficulty, Prime Minister.
Yes.
We're trying to undo a few centuries of Roman degradation on humanity. And you have a lot of people that have this knowledge. But this is what is called by Hoover when they talk about the COINTELPRO operations, when they infiltrated the Moorish Divine and National Movement. And then you had the breakup. And then you had the Temple of Allah, Gods and Earth, and different organizations that came out of it, with people sharing limited key information that would direct the people. But this has to go into the limitations, because they're still waging war. And this is where the hybrid Europeans and the Synagogue of Satan set up Executive Order 11490, known as King Alfred and Rex 84 operations of genocide, which is operative in these days. And this is part of what Obama was talking about when he exposed a little bit of it when he made his speech, when they did that roast with him. And it's like, you know, it's just like we have this heavy work of trying to liberate our people. And you can't convince them. The best thing we can do is give them records that's exposed among others who are actually contrary, who didn't, they didn't get rid of all the evidence. So we're showing their own records that expose them. But this is where the book of Revelation in the Septuaginta and the Bible expose them. That's why we tell people, go in the book of Revelation and recognize that the political system that they've been funding, thinking that they're Democrats and Republic, not knowing that both of them are the synagogue of Satan. And they've been playing good cop, bad cop with us. And we keep looking for them to solve the problem when they are the problem. Absolutely. It's a difficult thing to say. Why? Because we've all participated in it. That's the reality. Now, and so DrewAli brought the cure, cure for the sin-sick world. And, it might be hard for people to accept that, but it's still the truth. I yield the floor. What else can you say? That's the answer.
Yes, and I do like the comment from Original TD. I have to share this. Y'all have given so much clarity. Yes, please do share this information. It's really important that we do share this information. So please do so. It said the continued crusades of the Christian versus the Moors. Let's see what this says. The continued crusades, the Christians versus the Moors. Yes, it is a continuous crusade.
Now, and keep in mind, this is another part of the clarification, that the people who have been calling themselves Christians are really Cretans. So they're really fronting, just like the Bible said, those who claim to be Jews are not Jews. That's why when people go into history, they keep discovering that the corruption against humanity is what they would call the Judeo-Christian order. That's what they're really talking about. They're actually talking about Cretans who have been pretending to be Christians and pretending to be Jews, both of which are not. This is why this stuff is so difficult.
A whole nother lesson, you all. So we got, Grand Sheikh will keep going. Got it. I'm just going to take a few more comments. If someone says accountability, it's just that.
Yes, we've all participated in our own enslavement. And, ego blocks information sometimes, but we just got to get over ourselves and recognize that the Cretans, yes, they've been abusing us, but it ain't like we ain't been helping.
Absolutely. All right, more. So I just want you all to know there's a lot going on. In our next Real More Talks, we're going to talk about You know, there is a Moorish Ancient Forefathers Day, and we're going to talk about that. That's coming up in the park, and that's where we definitely have the Grand Sheik Pray the Ill, you know, and the temple here in Baltimore are going to be doing that. And so we're going to talk about that. You know, also too on Real Morris talking that and get people to support the Ancient Forefathers Day. But listen, Morris, really quickly before we leave, support us, donate to Morris Times with GSK@DurriyyahBey.com. Purchase a book from Circle7Publishing.com. Our humanitarian organization, DaughtersofDrewAli, please donate there. Also, you know, compensate the Grand Sheik for coming on tonight. You know, I got to try to get rid of this one. I got this one stood up there. I need to get rid of that one comment. Online schooling for Moorish children. Donate there. Also, DaughtersofDrewAli. And listen, purchase books. You can also email us at realmorristalk@yahoo.com. And we're going to start doing, you know, little spots of advertisement on different things. And so we have Asiatic businesses. We don't want to ask the Europeans to, you know, promote us and advertise their information and business. I'm not promoting nothing. If it's not Asiatic, if it's not melon, I'm not in it. It's not, you know, they don't have any melon in their skin. I'm not promoting that garbage. So we want to support our own. But first, we want to start with what we do have. We have our Circle7Publishing.com. We have to make sure that we purchase those books. We want you to send your children to our online schooling for Moorish children. It is a lot of work from home, you know, teaching your own children, but it's worth the reward, Morris. Please continue to do so. We also want to thank Grand Sheik, you know, for coming out today. Grand Sheik, you know, always we want to thank you for coming out. You know, it's so important that, you know.
Another interjection, Prime Minister. Now, and keep in mind, we are for peace and not for destruction. We know, however, that you can't liberate the people if they don't know the truth. And you also know some of the information that Malcolm and Khalid found out that created a foundation for their demise. It's uncomfortable, but it's the truth. Now you know what Malcolm really found out that they don't tell you in the movies. Some of it we just exposed to you. Anyway, have a great night. Islam and peace.
All right, everyone. Shukran. Yes. And so I want to say, Morris, you know, continue to support us. Grand Sheik will be glad to come and do, you know, different information, but you have to make sure that we support him because, listen, at his age, we give so much honor. You're 80 years old now, Grand Sheik, and he still does the work and still all of that too. And, you know, sometimes as age does slow us down, Morris. I mean, I know it does. It slows all of us down. But that doesn't mean we still don't have the fire in us, okay? So support. All right, until next time on Real Morris Talk, Morris, take care of yourselves and each other. You've been on Shadow Hour, Real Morris Talk, with Prime Minister National Grand Sheik Durriyyah Bey and my co-host tonight, National Grand Sheik Tarik Bey, with the, you know, the Yakub Experiment, fact or fiction. None of you all answered my questions in the actual beginning, but maybe you all will answer the questions and I can answer you back in the chat. All right, Morris. All right. We really thank you all and we care to life to continue to support each other. All right. Take care of yourselves and each other. All right, Morris. Real Morris Talk, Shadow Hour.